All right, so this is our first reading of the story, and it is important that you read it with a pen or a pencil in hand. Today, I would like you to just use like a blue or black pen or just a pencil to annotate your text, okay? And when you're annotating, you're going to circle any words. This is not new. We've done this before. Circle any words that are complicated or you're not 100% sure or you don't think other kids might know what they mean. Circle complicated or complex words. I want you to put an exclamation point next to something that surprises you. There should be more than one thing. And anything you have questions about, put a question mark. That's it. Circle the complex words, exclamation point, and question mark. Not new. We've done it several times, but you should be actively reading. There should be annotations on every single page, okay? So it continues on in your packet, and it looks like this. Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells. A little girl came into her papa's study, as she always did on Saturday morning before breakfast, and asked for a story. Well, what kind of a story shall I tell then? About Christmas. It's getting ready to be the season. It's past Thanksgiving already. Well, her papa roused himself from his writing by great effort. Well, then, I'll tell you about a little girl who wanted it to be Christmas every day of the year. How would you like that? I would love that, said the little girl, and she nestled into a comfortable shape in his lap, ready for listening. Once, there was a little girl who liked Christmas so much that she wanted it to be Christmas every day in the year, and as soon as Thanksgiving was over, she began to send postcards to the old Christmas fairy to ask if Christmas could last all year long. In about 3 weeks, or just the day before Christmas it was, she got a letter from the fairy saying she might have it Christmas every day for a year, and then they would see about having it for longer. The little girl was a good deal excited already, preparing for the old-fashioned once-a-year Christmas that was coming the next day, and perhaps the fairy's promise didn't make much of an impression on her, as it would have made at some other time. She just resolved to keep it to herself and surprise everybody with it as it kept coming true, and then it slipped out of her mind altogether. She had a splendid Christmas when she went to bed early so as to let Santa Claus have a chance at the stockings, and in the morning she was up first of anybody and went and felt them and found hers all lumpy in the packages of candy and oranges and grapes and pocketbooks and all kinds of small presents. Then she waited till the rest of the family were up, and she was the first to burst into the library, and when the doors were open, she looked at the large presents laid out on the table, books and boxes of stationery and dolls and little stoves and dozens of handkerchiefs and inkstands and skates and snow shovels and picture frames and little easels and boxes of watercolors and candied cherries and dolls, houses, and the big Christmas tree lighted and standing in the wastebasket in the middle. She had a splendid Christmas all day. She ate so much candy that she did not want any breakfast, and the whole afternoon the presents kept pouring in that the expressman had not had time to deliver the night before. She went around giving the presents she had gotten for the other people and came home and ate turkey and cranberry for dinner and plum pudding and raisins and oranges and more candy until she ended up with a stomachache. They had a light supper, and pretty soon everybody went to bed in a bad mood. The little girl slept very heavily, and she slept very late. But she was wakened at last by the other children dancing around her bed with their stockings full of presents in their hands. What is it? Said the little girl as she rubbed her eyes and tried to rise in the bed. Christmas, 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 they all shouted and waved their stockings. Nonsense. It was Christmas yesterday. Her brothers and sisters just laughed. We don't know about that. It's Christmas today anyway. Come in the library and see. And then all at once the little girl realized that the fairy was keeping her promise and her year of Christmases was beginning. She was dreadfully sleepy, and she sprang up like a lark that had overeaten itself and gone to bed cross, and darted into the library. There it was again, books and pocketbooks and boxes of stationery and candy. There was the Christmas tree blazing away and the family picking out their presents, and her father was looking pretty sleepy and perfectly puzzled, and her mother was ready to cry. I'm sure I don't see how I'm to dispose of all these things, said her mother, and her father said it seemed that they had had something similar just like it the day before, but he supposed he must have dreamed it. This struck the little girl as the best kind of joke, and she ate so much candy that she didn't want any breakfast. She went around carrying presents and had turkey and cranberry for dinner. Then she went out and played and came in to eat a light supper and went to bed tired from the day. Well, the next day, it was just like the same thing over and over again, but everybody was getting crosser. And at the end of the week's time, so many people had lost their tempers that you could even pick up lost tempers anywhere. They perfectly strewed the ground. Even when people tried to recover their tempers, they usually got somebody else's, and it made them the most dreadful mix. The little girl began to get frightened. Keeping the secret all to herself, she wanted to tell her mother, but she didn't dare to. And she was almost ashamed to ask the fairy to take back her gift. It seemed ungrateful and ill-bred, and she thought that she would try to stand it, but she hardly knew how she could for a whole year. So it went on and on. And it was Christmas. It was Christmas on St. Valentine's Day, on Washington's birthday, just the same as any day, and it didn't even skip the 1st of April, even though everything was counterfeit that day, and that was a little relief. After a while, coal and potatoes began to be awfully scarce, and so many had been wrapped up in tissue paper to fool papas and mamas with. Turkeys got to be about $1,000 apiece, and they got to passing off almost anything for turkeys, half-grown hummingbirds, and even rocks out of the Arabian Nights, not real turkeys, were so scarce. And cranberries, well, they asked about $0.10 apiece for cranberries, and all the woods and orchards were cut down for Christmas trees, and there were woods and orchards that used to be, it looked like a stubble field with stumps, and after a while they had to make Christmas trees out of rags and stuff them with bran like old-fashioned dolls. And there were plenty of rags because people got so poor buying presents for one another that they couldn't get any new clothes, and they just wore their old ones to tatters. They got so poor that everybody had to go to the poorhouse except the confectioners and the fancy storekeepers and the picture book sellers and the expressmen. They all got so rich and proud that they could hardly wait upon a person when he came to buy. It was perfectly shameful. Well, after it had gone on about 3 or 4 months, the little girl, whenever she came into the room in the morning and saw those great, ugly, lumpy stockings dangling at the fireplace and the disgusting presents around everywhere, used to just sit down and burst out crying. In 6 months, she was perfectly exhausted, and she couldn't even cry anymore. She just lay on the lounge and rolled her eyes and pouted. About the beginning of October, she took to sitting down on dolls whenever she found them, French dolls or any kind. She hated the sight of them so, and by Thanksgiving she was crazy, and she just slammed the presents across the room. By that time, people didn't carry presents around nicely anymore. They flung them over the fence or through the windows or anything. Also, instead of running their tongues out and taking great pains to write dear Papa or Mama or brother or sister or Susie or Sammy or whoever it was, and troubling to get the spelling right, and they signed their names and Xmas 18. They used to write the gift in the gift books. Take it, you horrid old thing, and then go and bang it against the front door. Nearly everybody had built barns to hold their presents, but pretty soon the barns overflowed, and then they used to let them lie out in the rain or anywhere. Sometimes the police used to come and tell them to shovel their presents off the sidewalk or they would arrest them. I thought you said everybody had gone to the poorhouse, or interrupted the little girl. They did go at first, said her papa, but after a while the poorhouses got so full that they had to send the people back to their own houses. They tried to cry when they got back, and they couldn't even make the least sound. Why couldn't they? Because they had lost their voices saying Merry Christmas so much. And how was it at Thanksgiving? Her papa hesitated. Well, I'm almost afraid to tell you. I'm afraid you'll think it's wicked. Well, tell anyway, said the little girl. Well, before it came Thanksgiving, it was leaked out who had caused all the Christmases, and the little girl who had suffered such that she had talked about it in her sleep. And after that, hardly anybody would play with her. People just perfectly despised her because it had it not been for her greediness, it wouldn't have happened. So now when it came to Thanksgiving, she wanted them to go to church and have squash pie and turkey and show their gratitude. They said all of the turkeys had been eaten up for their old Christmas dinners, and if she would stop the Christmases, they would see about some gratitude. Wasn't it dreadful? And the very next day, the little girl began to send letters to the Christmas fairy and the telegrams to stop it. But it didn't do any good. Then she got to calling the fairy's house, but the little girl came to the door and always said, not at home, or engaged, or at dinner, or something like that. So it went on till the once-a-year Christmas Eve. The little girl fell asleep, and when she woke up in the morning, she found it was nothing but a dream, suggested the little girl. No, indeed, said her papa. It was all every bit true. Well, what did she find out then? Why, that it isn't Christmas. Why, that it wasn't Christmas at last, and it wasn't ever going to be any more. Well, there was a great rejoicing in all the country, and it extended clear into Canada. The people met together and everywhere and hugged and cried for joy, and the city carts went around and gathered up the candy and the raisins and dumped them into the river, and it made the fish perfectly sick. The whole United States, as far out as Alaska, was one blaze of bonfires where the children were burning up their gift books and presents of all kinds. They had the greatest time. The little girl went to thank the old fairy because she had stopped it being Christmas, and she said she hoped it would keep her promise and see that Christmas never came again. Then the fairy frowned and asked her if she was sure she knew what she meant. The little girl asked her, why not? And the old fairy said that now she was behaving just as greedily as ever, and she better look out. This made the little girl think it all over again, and she said that she would be willing to have it be Christmas about once every 1,000 years. Then she said 100, and then she said 10, and at last she got down to 1. Then the fairy said that was the good old way that had pleased people ever since Christmas began, and she agreed. How will that do? Asked Papa. First rate, said the little girl, but she hated to have the story stop and was rather sad. However, her mama put her head in at the door and asked her papa, are you never coming to breakfast? What have you been telling that child? Oh, just a moral tale. The little girl caught him around the neck again and said, Papa, I'm so glad Christmas only comes once a year. Okay, now there's going to be a Google form that'll be the next thing down. And what you need to do is I want you to write down at least 3 words. You're going to have 3 places that you have to put words that you circled. And I need you to put 3 places that surprised you that you marked with an exclamation point, and 3 questions that you have. Okay? So you're going to need to fill that out in the Google form. And so if you've done your STAR test and your pre-reading with the pros and cons and listen to the song, and then the first reading with the annotations in the Google form, you are done for today. Thank you.